Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this edition of King David's Knowledge. Today we'll be discussing about African American history and all those that influenced to make changes in this country. Now we'll find out when and who they are. Let's begin. The Stone Rebellion, sometimes called Cato's Conspiracy or Cato's Rebellion, was a slave rebellion that began on 9 September 1739 in the colony of South Carolina. It was the largest slave uprising in the British mainland colonies, with 25 colonists and 35 to 50 Africans killed. The uprising was led by native Africans who were likely from the Central African Kingdom of Congo, as some of the rebels spoke Portuguese. Their leader, Jemmy, was a literate slave. In some reports, however, he's referred to as Cato, and likely was held by Cato or Cater, family who lived near the Ashley River and north of the Stone River. He led 20 other enslaved Congolese who may have been former soldiers in the armed march south from the Stone River, for which the rebellion is named. They were bound for Spanish Florida. This was due to a Spanish effort to destabilize British rule. They had promised freedom and land at St. Augustine to slaves who escaped from the British colonies. The Conspiracy of 1741, also known as the Negro Plot of 1741 or the Slave Insurrection of 1741, was a purported plot by slaves and poor whites in the British colony of New York in 1741 to revolt and level New York City with a series of fires. Historians disagree as to whether such a plot existed and if there was one and its scale. During the court cases, the prosecution kept changing the grounds of accusation, ending with linking the insurrection to a popish plot by Spaniards and other Catholics. In 1741, Manhattan had the second largest slave population of any city in the 13 colonies after Charleston, South Carolina. Rumors of a conspiracy arose against a background of economic competition between poor whites and slaves. Severe winter war between Britain and Spain, with heightened anti-Catholic and anti-Spanish feelings, and recent slave revolts in the South Carolina and St. John in the Caribbean. In March and April 1741, a series of 13 fires erupted in lower Manhattan, the most significant one within the walls of Fort George, then the home of the governor. After another fire at a warehouse, a slave was arrested, and after having been seen fleeing it, a 16-year-old Irish indentured servant, Mary Burton, arrested in a case of stolen goods, testified against the others as participants in a supposedly growing conspiracy of poor whites and blacks to burn the city, kill the white men, take the white women for themselves, and elect a new king and governor. Crispus Attucks, March 5th, 1770, was an American stevedore of African Native American descent, widely regarded as the first person killed in the Boston Massacre and thus the first American killed in the American Revolution. Historians disagree on whether he was a free man or an escaped slave, but most agree that he was of Natick or possibly Wampanoag and African descent. Two major sources of white witnesses that testify the Boston Massacre, published in 1770, did not refer to him as black nor as Negro. It appears that Bostonians viewed him as being of mixed ethnicity. According to a contemporaneous account in Pennsylvania Gazette, he was a Malawitt man named Crispus Attucks, who was born in Framingham, but lately belonged to New Providence and was here ordered to go for North Carolina. Gabriel, 1776, October 10th, 1800, today normally as Gabriel Prosser, literate slave blacksmith who planned a large slave rebellion in the Richmond area in the summer of 1800. Information regarding the revolt was leaked prior to its execution, and he and 25 followers were taken captive and hanged in punishment. In reaction, Virginia and other state legislators passed restrictions on free blacks, as well as prohibiting the education, assembly, and hiring out of slaves to restrict their chances to learn and plan similar rebellions. The 1811 German Coast Uprising was a revolt of black slaves in parts of the territory of Orleans on January 8 through 10, 1811. The uprising occurred on the east bank of the Mississippi River, what is now St. John the Baptist, St. Charles, and Jefferson parishes, Louisiana. While the slave insurgency was the largest in the U.S. history, the rebels killed only 2 white men. Confrontations with militia and executions after trial killed 95 black people. Between 64 and 125 slave men marched from sugar plantations and near the present-day Laplace on German coast toward the city of New Orleans. They collected more men along the way. Some accounts claim a total of 200 to 500 slaves participated. During their 2-day, 20-mile march, their men burned 5 plantation houses, 3 completely several sugar houses and crops. They were armed mostly with hand tools. Nat Turner's Rebellion, also known as the Southampton Insurrection, was a rebellion of black slaves that took place in Southampton County, Virginia, in August 1831, led by Nat Turner. Fugitive enslaved people killed from 55 to 65 people, at least 51 being white. The rebellion was put down with a few days, but Turner survived in hiding more than 2 months afterwards. The rebellion was effectively suppressed at Belmont Plantation on the morning of August 23, 1831. There was a widespread fear in the aftermath, and white militia organized in the retaliation in opposition to the enslaved people. The state executed 56 slaves accused of being part of the rebellion, and many non-participant slaves were punished in the frenzy. Approximately 120 slaves and 3 blacks were murdered by militias and mobs in the area. State legislators passed new laws prohibiting education of slaves and free black people, restricting rights in assembly and other civil liberties for black people, and requiring white ministers to be present at all worship services. To all my brothers and sisters still fighting that struggle, I stand with you always. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this edition of King David's Knowledge.